everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as 4BX257, here to bring you another 1980s and 90s G.I. Joe toy review. And today I'll be taking a look at the G.I. Joe's all-terrain vehicle, the 1991
Motorized
Battle Wagon. The Battle Wagon makes its first comic book appearance in the Old comic run of G.I. Joe in issue number 120, and makes its first animated appearance in the Deke animated second season episode titled Long Live Rock and Roll Part 2. Despite being a rather large and, as I said, motorized, battery-operated vehicle, and probably very expensive at retail in its time, it did not come with a driver included. The Battle Wagon is a massive, chunky toy. Here's a 3 3/4 inch figure, just to give you a sense of scale, and he's barely taller than one of the tires. That's huge. But how huge exactly? Well, this thing is about 13 inches long, and about 8 inches wide. But more importantly, with the cannon on there, it's 11.5 inches tall. That's big. Not to mention that this thing is actually quite heavy for a toy, and I haven't even put the batteries in it yet. And now to take a look at the Battle Wagon's features, starting with a feature which I don't normally discuss on G.I. Joe vehicles, even when they have them, and that is the tires. Of course, as I said before, the tires are only a little bit shorter than action figures themselves, but not only are they rubbery, but they're also inflated. Here in the front we have a very aggressive looking bumper, which I don't think is terribly necessary considering how much ground clearance we have, but it's home to the real working winch. We just have to remove the hook from this little piece here, which is the official hook retaining bar. This right here is a thumb wheel, and we just pay that out. We actually have a very decent amount of rope length here. The hook, by the way, is a standard hook mold which Hasbro uses on quite a lot of its vehicles, starting way back in 1983 with their Dragonfly. Of course, you can roll it back. Again, with just using your thumb. It's not motorized in any way, but that's fine because it does actually hold, like once you stop like kind of rolling it with your thumb, it does hold very decently. Up on top we have a driver canopy protecting the seats underneath it. We have a little bit of a clip retaining the front of it in, so you can swing this all the way up. And you can see that there are actually 2 seats in here. There's some really nice detail in there, but neither seat gets a steering wheel, which is kind of unfortunate. As for this forward-facing armament, on either side we have these little guns, which can only swivel up and down like this, but they're meant to be controlled by figures sitting in either side of the gun buckets, like so. And each of the gun has one little joystick on each side, so you can actually put a figure's hand on there in order to simulate controlling it. However, there is one larger cannon here, which can only rotate this way, which actually gets in the way of this particular gun, and also it can't traverse this way because it's now getting in the way of the cockpit. It's rather strange. Oddly enough, if you take the cockpit off, you can rotate it this way. Weird. And on the back of the vehicle we have yet another aggressive looking bumper, this time situated a bit lower than the one at the front, so you would think that it would be a bit more practical, especially when we have a molded on universal tow hook. However, despite being a bit lower, it's still quite high, and the tow hook itself is really small. So putting towed accessories on here like 1987 Coastal Defender or the 1988 Road Toad is still a bit difficult and kind of looks a little bit weird because it's still very small and kind of on an angle, and this thing could slip off of the tow hitches. We also have some extra foot pegs on here so you can carry some extra people, and we have the on-off forward reverse switch for the motorized feature, but I'll get to that in just a moment. It seems like the right side of the vehicle is more interesting than the left, because on this side only we have some extra missile storage, as well as this platform with even more foot pegs on here so you can carry and display even more action figures. And on the very top we have the missile cannon. with a seat for one figure to sit in there. And we do have a little joystick there, so you can pretend that he controls it. Now the cannon itself can rotate up like this. It's on a little ratchet. The first ratchet is a little bit weak on mine, but then again, this is actually a very heavy cannon. It ratchets up like that, and up like that, and I think that's about the highest it can rotate up. It can also swivel around. It's kind of caught here. You can swivel around the other way, and it's caught on the side of the body there. So not a full 360 degrees, but quite a bit of range. Of course, the missiles that it takes look like this. The actual cannon only takes about 8, but you get 12 in total. So that's why you have these 4 in storage here. That's quite nice that they gave you extra missiles, because you will lose these, because this thing really does fire. As a matter of fact, it fires automatically with the push of a button, which is right here. But I'll demonstrate that in just a moment. Curiously, the back of the box mentions that the Battle Wagon can fit up to 8 figures, and that's really the only place where it actually gives you a number of how many figures that you can place on it. However, that number is clearly wrong, because while I can seat 6 figures on this vehicle, there are plenty more foot pegs around here, meaning that I can put up to 13 figures. 2 in the cockpit, 2 in each of the gun buckets, 1 on the seat here. And while it may look quite a bit crowded here, there was actually 3 foot pegs along this one side and 4 on the bumper. But you're probably wondering, well, that's only 12 figures. Where's the 13th? Well, if I lift the cannon completely up, there he is, sitting in the cavity left over by the removable cannon. They really made good use of this empty space by sculpting in all these controls and a nice little seat in there. You don't have to remove the missile cannon from the Battle Wagon if you want to use it. As a matter of fact, you might actually find it easier to use while it's attached to the Battle Wagon. I just took it off because it's a lot easier to film, seeing as the whole attachment thing was really, really tall. However, if you do want to use this as a separate accessory, what you want to do is you want to pull this thing out like that, so that when you're resting it down, it's a lot more stable. It's almost like a strange type of tripod that they went and tried to make here. Very interesting solution to that. However, like I said, this is a motorized item, so you'll want to put some batteries in there. This is actually a Phillips head screw in here. So you want to take that out, pull this thing out, and this thing takes 2 AA batteries. This is your firing button back here, so if you press it really quickly, 1 pops out. But if you push it down and hold it, rapid fire. In order to reload the cannon, you just slide a missile into the barrel like that. You don't have to put all of them in there in order to activate it. You can just still fire off 1 or 2 if you just want to. And you don't have to put the missiles in any particular order. You can just put them in randomly like that. However, be aware that the missiles, they don't really click and are firm in there. They can slide out if you angle this thing downwards. And if they are slightly out like this, they might not fire off. They do have to be flush against the back of the cannon barrels. And now to power up the vehicle, we'll want to put some batteries in this thing. The panel down here is your battery cover, and it's held in by spring retention. In other words, you have to push this thing forward in order for it to pop out, which is nice because at least you don't need a screwdriver, unlike the cannon. So you just push it forward like that, and it'll come out. The Battle Wagon takes 4 C-cell batteries, adding even more weight to an already heavy toy. So now you can put the battery cover on by angling the front tabs in like that, and then squeezing it so that the back tabs line up, just like this. Now you're probably thinking that putting the batteries into the toy like this is a rather obvious, easy thing to do, but I'll show you why it's important in just a moment. And now by pushing the sliding button towards the ladder, we can put it in forward gear. And as you can see, nothing happened. Put it back into the middle, which is its neutral or off state. Put it into the other direction, which is towards the door, which is its reverse gear. And again, nothing happened. Now I have to admit, when I bought this thing, the seller said that it did not work, although he did give really good pictures of the inside of the battery compartment and nothing seemed to be out of sorts. So I was thinking, when I bought this, I'll just fix it myself. And I did. But here's how I did it, and here's why the seller thought that this did not work. And here is half of the problem. No, I don't mean the arrangement of positive and negatives. These are in the correct order. But part of the problem here is I'm using modern batteries. Now, this isn't the case for all batteries made today, but I'm pretty sure that this mechanism was really meant for an older type of battery which didn't have the negative portion so deeply or so flush with the bottom of the battery. It actually would have gone out to the corners here and would have made better contact with the bottom of the cover, which has the contact strip on here. And this is the other 50% of the problem here, because the contact strip, which is meant to hit the negative portion of the battery, here, this is also dipped in and really flat. So of course, it's just not going to make contact with a battery which has this particular shape. So what I've gone and done is I've gone with a 20-cent solution. No, I mean that literally. A pair of dimes will cure this. And now forward gear and reverse gear. As you can see, all 4 wheels were actually being powered, meaning that this is correct. This really is a 4-wheel drive motorized vehicle. Despite its Tonka toy-like chunky proportions, I've actually grown rather fond of this vehicle simply because of all the really cool features on here. And I've learned to ignore this big orange chunk on the top here. However, I totally understand that a lot of collectors really don't ignore this chunky orange cannon on here because the color isn't mirrored anywhere else on here, and the vehicle actually does have a relatively subdued color scheme, especially for a 1990s G.I. Joe vehicle. And yes, the blue is rather bright, but it's no brighter than what you would find on maybe a Cobra vehicle of the same time. And yes, I do realize that some collectors look at the overall gray and blue and think, well, maybe this was originally designed as a Cobra vehicle, and they just put that orange thing on top there just to make it look more a bit friendlier and more G.I. Joe-like. However, as you can see on the top here, this thing has a molded in G.I. Joe logo, so this was never meant to be a Cobra vehicle at first. And this is something that they've actually started in the 1991 year and will continue into 1994 by actually molding the faction onto the vehicles. It's a rather interesting little thing that they started to do there. One little detail which I didn't mention before, but is something I really appreciate, is the fact that they've actually put little stairs leading up into the G.I. Joe cockpit or into the gun bucket here. Now these stairs are really shallow and the G.I. Joe figures themselves cannot actually use them, but it's really the thought that counts, and something which is kind of missing in a lot of the other G.I. Joe vehicles and bases. just the idea of how to go around into their vehicles or bases. Again, we have a little shallow ladder here, which I pointed out before, and that is not useful for an actual figure to actually, climb and pose onto that. But it gives you the illusion, the imagination, that a figure is climbing up here and into the seat of the cannon. As I've stated before, the Battle Wagon did not come with a driver figure, and in the comic books and cartoons it was used as a generic vehicle, so I don't think I've ever seen a particular character drive this thing twice, so there really is no character associated with driving this vehicle. However, my pick for this 1991 vehicle is not a 1991 or 92 or even a 1990 figure, but actually a figure from 1993. That is the 1993 Battle Corps Cross Country, or Cross Country version 2. And as you can see, I not only picked him because his color scheme just matches the Battle Wagon exactly, but the fact of the matter is that he is a driver figure, but he wasn't released with a vehicle. The Battle Corps line was, of course, the basic line at the time, and he just came with a tree of weapons and a spring-loaded cannon. Whoop-de-doo. He's a driver figure. He's meant to be with a vehicle. And yet, here's a vehicle which matches him perfectly. It's kind of suspicious that he has the same color scheme. To me, a lot of the figures in the Battle Corps line, which just sort of added to that line and sort of bulked it up, always seem to be cancelled from another line. And I believe that Cross Country may have been intended for a vehicle. Maybe not the Battle Wagon, but he really should have come with a vehicle. And I think that this suits that good old boy perfectly. And here's the Battle Wagon compared to another battery-operated G.I. Joe vehicle, the 1982 through 83 Mobat. You can see that the Mobat, while was already kind of a smallish tank, smaller than it really should have been, it really looks tiny compared to the Battle Wagon. And here's the Battle Wagon compared to yet another battery-operated G.I. Joe vehicle, the 1987 Crossfire. Now, the Crossfire was an RC vehicle and actually quite fast. But as I've learned, the Battle Wagon is actually quite fast as well due to it having four-wheel drive. I'm kind of curious as to which one is actually faster, but that's something that I'll probably do in another video. I'd rather just demonstrate the Battle Wagon on its own in rough terrain. If you're looking for a Battle Wagon on the aftermarket, I have to say that they're a rather sturdy toy. I don't really see many broken on the aftermarket, and I do find them complete with all of their parts, and for a very low price. They're not terribly popular, even though they were quite expensive at the time due to being a dual motorized toy, obviously. There are a few things you do have to look out for, as some of them can be missing a few parts. They do come with two different battery covers, one of which comes with a screw, so you do have to be careful that one is included, or you can find them easily on the aftermarket. Of course, it comes with 12 missiles, only 8 of them are being used, so sometimes sellers just sort of skip a few of them, so you do have to look out for that. Another thing too is, on the bright side, you might be missing one or two of these little side cannons. However, they are not size specific. You just buy one and you can just flip it over and you've got a left or a right side as needed. Of course, with any battery operated toy, the first thing you should check, especially if you want to use the battery operated feature, is to make sure that the battery contacts on the bottom are clean and ready to be used. Here's a few cleaning tips though. You can easily remove corrosion with some white vinegar, and you can get rid of oxidation on battery contact points with an eraser. Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind the scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.